impressive CV. He has more than 2 decades experience in the fields of nuclear energy, including nuclear safety. He was sworn initially as commissioner of the NRC in June 2020, and finally he was designated NRC's chair in January 2021 by President Biden. Before that, he served as in the Appropriations Committee of the Senate, and he played also several roles in the Department of Energy. Chris, we really appreciate that you were ready and available to deliver this conference to us, because as I mentioned before, for us NRC is more than a reference, let's say technical reference, is some organization that we look as a twin. That means that we are especially happy to continue working with you. I think that in his conference, Chris will address the current nuclear regulatory programs in the States, as well as, of course, as the main future challenges that they have to face in the coming future. Well, at the end of his speech, I hope that we will have some time and chance for some questions, so that I'm not going to say any more, because we are anxious to listen to you, Chris, not to me, so that the floor is yours. Please.
Thank you. Juan Carlos, and let's see. There we go.
I will sit there.
Please? Okay, all right. I am, exactly. I'm flying solo. And thank you all. First of all, thank you, Juan Carlos, for that very kind introduction and for hosting this visit. I agree completely. We have developed a very good friendship over my tenure, and I've benefited enormously from Juan Carlos's experience and wisdom, both here in Spain and on the international stage. And I look forward to continuing to do so. But it's also been a great pleasure. It's not often that we get to meet all of the members of the Commission and develop those relationships, and it has been a real pleasure for me to be able to do that with all of the members of the Spanish Council. So thank you. I don't want to talk too much, because I would like to get to the questions that you all might have about the situation in the U.S., but I did want to cover some of the high points that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is facing. It wasn't very long ago in the United States when I think we thought we were facing the gradual phase out of nuclear power based just purely on economics. And we had a number of reactors that either shut down or were slated to shut down in the, say, 2015 to 2020 timeframe that now have decided to stay open for some period of time, and we have the first reactor ever that has shut down and is actually endeavoring to restart after that shutdown, and is going through the regulatory process literally as we speak. And so the environment for nuclear energy in the United States, even in this short period of time, has changed a great deal because of incentives that the U.S. government has put in place to reach climate goals. The existing reactors, of which there are 94 in the U.S., are expected to continue to operate longer. So almost all of the plants in the United States have a license for 60 years, but a significant number are also pursuing a license to operate out to 80 years. And the various utilities and operators are incorporating that into their generation plans to meet their climate goals going forward. And so the aging management and the examination and oversight and inspection of both the programs and the conditions of the plants themselves is a very significant priority for the NRC, and we're spending more and more time on that, both looking at the safety and the environmental aspects of those reviews. We're also seeing plants explore new use cases, so for things like hydrogen production, data centers, chip manufacturing, where they would the plants would supply that electricity directly to those facilities as opposed to through the grid. We're seeing upgrades to the equipment at the plants, so digital instrumentation and control, up to safety systems. We haven't seen a lot of interest yet on the safety related side of the house, but there's significant investment going in at plants at various stages of the upgrade of digital instrumentation and control. And then one of the most significant aspects, in addition to the operating reactors operating for a longer period of time, but actually producing more megawatts in each of those periods as well, where we're looking at higher enrichment and higher burnup fuels, and the associated technology development that has to accompany that. So doping and cladding of fuels that allows for those longer burn up and higher temperatures, etc. And so it is it's a very dynamic environment just within the operating fleet alone. There's significant interest in the U.S. in new reactors, so small modular reactors of various kinds, both light water and non-light water reactor designs, and we're continuing to learn about those. We have a regulatory process in the United States that allows these reactor designers to come to us to resolve specific technical issues up front. So classification of system structures and components with regard to safety, fuel qualification for these reactors, quality assurance programs, etc., so that when they come in for their full application, then it is more of an integrated review because we've already determined the significance of some of these. But I think the biggest shift for us is really to go to a more risk-informed approach that relies more heavily on probabilistic risk assessment in a leading role rather than a supporting role in a deterministic way. And we're leveraging risk insights from our research institutions, our universities, as well as the long history of experience within the NRC. Last year we licensed, in November of last year, we licensed the first non-light water reactor in the United States in 56 years. It is a salt-cooled, triso-fueled reactor to be constructed in Tennessee. And it is the first, it's a prototype, basically, of a reactor that will be, in theory, scaled up. But in addition to the safety assessment, modernizing the safety assessment to accommodate some of these new designs, we're also looking at emergency planning rules, siting guidelines, security, and environmental assessments for reactors that have a much smaller footprint, that have passive safety features, functional containment, and other aspects that really drive a different approach to regulation than what we've seen for the large light water reactor fleet. In addition to the focus on the reactors, then, is focus on fuel cycle facilities. So we have an application in the NRC for the first fuel fabrication facility in several decades. We are for the manufacture of triso fuels, and we're going to be getting license amendments for existing facilities to make these advanced fuel types. Metal fuel, which we have not produced in the United States in significant quantities in many, many decades, as well. In addition to those facilities, then, there's the storage and transportation and all of the other kinds of infrastructure, regulatory and physical, that goes along with that. So think of your storage containers, your transportation containers, etc. Decommissioning we actually have 25 shutdown reactors in the United States. 16 of those are undergoing active decommissioning as we speak, and we have inspectors in all of our regions of the country who are out overseeing the radiological aspects of that decommissioning, the movement of the spent fuel out of the pools to dry spent storage, the disassembly of the containment buildings and the reactor vessels, etc. We have new business models in the United States, which I can talk some more about, that is changing some of the ways in which decommissioning is happening. And to address some of that, we also have a new set of regulations. So historically, you all are familiar with Part 50. Decommissioning happened as a series of exemptions from the requirements in Part 50. And so the licensee would request an exemption from, say, the emergency planning zone requirements or other things. And in that way, the regulatory requirements would be whittled down. We're in the process, in fact, I just got the final regulation on my desk last week of putting a more affirmative and holistic approach to decommissioning while still maintaining the basic safety standard, which is actually a greenfield standard in the United States. So at the end of that decommissioning process. So there's a lot of innovation and things going on there too. In fact, I mentioned to the council earlier, we have started to decommission Three Mile Island Unit 2, which will be a very complex endeavor. But I think something that folks should watch. Underlying all of this, of course, is our international cooperation and the importance and the points of connection across many areas with our Spanish counterparts, with the IAEA, with the many multilateral groups that we engage in. And I've touched on a lot of the themes where people will come to me and say, we'd like to, decommissioning, new reactors, extended operations. Those are probably the top three areas. And on the new reactor area too, we're trying to enhance our international collaboration in order to benefit from others' experience and their technical reviews on these new technologies. So if you think, for example, there's a strong interest in the GE Hitachi BWX-300 small modular reactor, and so we're working with Canada and the UK on doing some joint technical reviews, hopefully seeing efficiency and economy benefits from that. But also I look at it and I think, okay, well, high temperature gas reactors are maybe making a comeback. There are experts of those in the world, the UK, Japan, others, where we can collaborate further. I think there are too many technologies for any of us to try and handle them all alone, and so I think international collaboration will be more important than ever going forward. We discussed with the council this morning the human resources challenges and the hiring and developing of staff and providing. It's not just bringing in new staff, but it's retaining the staff and the expertise that we have. Because there is so much excitement and enthusiasm for new nuclear in the United States, our people are very attractive. Unfortunately, I think there are a few companies who maybe don't realize that they actually want to keep those people in the regulator for their own benefit in order to support licensing reviews down the road. But this has become a pressing issue. We've restarted an entry-level program. We call it the Nuclear Regulator Apprenticeship Network, where we bring in recent graduates and they work in different parts all around the agency, and then find a home. We are focusing on universities student development grants, curriculum development grants, research fellowships, and other things to cultivate the relationship at the university level. And also then investing in more training for our current staff to develop the skill sets that are needed. It is it's becoming much more of a it's really become a focus across the entire agency. And while we're doing this, because we are approaching what we call in the United States the silver tsunami, the increased retirements, particularly in the nuclear sector, we want to bring people in before we see those retirements in order to transfer knowledge. So knowledge management is a very significant issue for the NRC right now, and to make sure that the things that we've learned over the many decades and the experts that we have, that what they know is transferred to the next generation, so that we can benefit from that. But also, 10 or 15 years ago, we thought that we were going to build a lot of new nuclear power in the United States. And we did issue a number of licenses. As it turns out, only the Vogtle project in Georgia in the United States was the project that came to fruition. But the agency staffed up. We hired significantly, and to over 4,000 people. And then, because that renaissance did not materialize, we've been kind of declining ever since to around 2,700. And that decline has been a significant impact on morale over time in the form of promotion opportunities and so forth. And so one of the, I think, issues for the NRC staff and for the safety culture and the organizational culture that we have as a challenge is to inspire innovation, inspire creative thinking about how to accomplish our mission with a potential for an increased workload, but not necessarily significant hiring, right? Hiring enough to kind of to stay steady, but to see how the environment evolves, how the market evolves, and then kind of staff accordingly. It's a much more cautious, I think, approach to hiring and staffing than maybe we did 15 years ago, where we hired up very significantly and then had to come back down again. But even throughout this, and as I think one of the other big cultural shifts is to then have a more risk-informed approach overall to our regulation and our oversight. And I think about risk-informing regulation as relying heavily on data and heavily relying on diversity of experiences and perspectives among the staff. And for data, the NRC is reaching its 50th anniversary. And over that time, we have learned a lot about what's safety significant, about how to conduct inspections. We've learned it based on our own experience, but also from our licensees. And so I talk to the staff about having confidence in our abilities to make technical decisions, to communicate effectively with the public, to keep public health and safety at the center, but also the confidence to rely on what we've learned to focus on the most safety significant aspects of our work. I sometimes say confidence in our abilities and confidence in our ability to change. The other significant part of this that really, I think, gets to nuclear safety culture is a high trust environment. High trust between senior leadership, including on the commission, and staff to accomplish the mission. Trust in the commission and senior leadership to set direction and to help navigate what is really an uncertain environment. But also staff trust amongst each other. where we have a safe environment to raise issues, to raise concerns, but that people know also that those concerns, technical issues, et cetera, will be fairly adjudicated. I think sometimes, and I've been to a couple of plants where I've really seen great examples of safety culture, and I always look for examples of what I would call ownership. Staff employees really feeling pride and ownership of their aspects of plant operations. And I heard this at one particular plant in the U.S. where it was in the radiation protection department, and we were going to get our dosimeters to go into the radiation controlled area. And he said, welcome to my radiation control office. It was welcome to my radiation control. He had complete ownership and accountability and responsibility for that area. And I share this story a lot with the NRC staff because I think it's really something to look at and aspire to. And I also tell this story at other plants where maybe I don't hear that. But so much of what any organization hopes to accomplish is really about the people in that organization and how they interact and relate to each other. And that's no less true at the NRC, where we're almost 3,000 people, or at the CSN, or even some of our smaller regulatory counterparts around the world. And so it's one of the most interesting and fruitful discussions I think we can often have. And with that, like I said, I don't want to talk too long, but because I'm happy to answer questions, and I'd really be interested to hear what it is you all would like to talk about, whether here in the room or online. So, yeah, that's fine. But thank you all for being here, and thank you again for hosting this.
Well, thank you, Chris, as he has already offered. This is now your turn to ask questions or to share with the rest of the audience and with us your views or your reactions to this conference. Thank you for the conference. It has been very informative. And well, I think you were able to cover the wide spectrum of issues related to the regulatory activity in the U.S. Please, any question? If any one of you would like to ask anything, I would ask you to introduce yourself, please. Gonzalo, I think that Gonzalo Carbo is you? Yeah, please.
Hi, Gonzalo Carbo from Endesa, Spain. I'm just curious about the number of subsequent license renewable that licensees have applied in the state so far. I don't know if you can comment on that.
Yeah, it's about 10 so far.
10 so far.
And we've had a bit of a pause while we work out some of the environmental assessment framework. But that once that is resolved, which actually should be next month, that number is going to increase. We think we can handle about 6 or 8 applications at a time, maybe kind of issuing one every 3 or 4 months. But yeah, I expect them.
And another question, if I may. In terms of new application for SMRs, now, can you give us an overview of what the license, the applications that you have at this moment in review?
Yeah, we only have one application in review at the moment. We issued a construction permit for this initial test reactor in Tennessee. We have there's a second version of that reactor that is under review right now. And then we're expecting several more applications, I would say, in the next 12 to 15 months. based on how technology development is going, for a salt-cooled metal-fueled fast reactor, a high-temperature gas TRISO-fueled reactor, and then a smaller boiling water reactor. Those are probably the three big ones. There are some other micro designs that are also out there, but it's the timing on when those applications are going to come in is not entirely clear. But so.
Immaculada.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. You have mentioned that the business on the... Sorry, Inmaculada Simón, Consejo de Seguridad Nuclear. You have mentioned that the commissioning business is changing, and there is some new regulation on your table. And can you tell us something else, more detail?
Yes, we don't have a government body that is responsible for decommissioning the way Spain does. It is entirely a private, the owner of the plant is responsible for decommissioning. Now they have to have, like in Spain, deposited money in a fund that would be sufficient to cover the costs of decommissioning. But historically, the owner of the utility would also decommission the plant. Instead, a company or several companies have started buying the plant from the utility and then decommissioning that, and then under the law and our regulations, if there's X amount, they buy the fund too, and if they can perform the decommissioning within our regulations for less than what's in the fund, they get to keep the difference. And so that's the kind of the change in the business model. That had not really happened before in the US, and we're thinking about it has prompted some, I think, reconsideration of our financial assurance requirements in that regard, particularly if a company has several decommissioning plants in its portfolio, and there needs to be, and each plant has its own fund, but there may be additional funds required from the parent company, and it's in terms of the decommissioning rule itself, it sets up several phases of decommissioning. Rather than have it be by exemption, it'll say, okay, you've defueled the reactor, but say the fuel is still in the pool, and that would be, say, phase one. And there are requirements around the emergency planning zone, around fuel management, radiation protection, et cetera, for phase one. And then you would defuel the pool out to dry storage. That would be phase two, and you start to take apart the structures and so forth. Phase three would be you actually then, say, for example, the reactor vessel, the high activity metals and so forth that need to go to radioactive disposal. And so it has that process associated with it. Some of the comments we've gotten on this new framework is about public participation and where there's opportunities for the public to intervene or to challenge decisions, and that's something particularly I'm going to be looking at as we review the final iteration of this.
Thank you. I think that we will follow up this development, which is of high
Be happy to
interest for
provide
us.
more information on that.
Exactly. What I see is that then your system is in some way approaching to ours, so that when you license a new decommissioning project, you need to check. You need to approve the transfer of the license, and you need to check that the new licensee is really capable. Of, let's say, fulfilling the different issues related to the commissioning.
Yes.
Okay, any more questions, please, Nieves?
Hello, I'm Nieves. Thank you very much for your interesting conference. Question about how many women you have in your technical staff. That's the first question. Just very short.
Not enough.
Good response. No.
So across the agency, it is about 40%, but in the technical areas, it's lower, and it is. We were discussing this earlier. It's against the law in the United States to have to set a target for the hiring or participation of women. We can't have that kind of target and then hire to that. And so it is about recruitment and about staff development and about engaging women in the agency on career development activities. I actually spend some time on this. We have, I think, 2 or maybe 3 events at the upcoming RIC that are dedicated to gender equality. And I'm always interested in learning particularly from my international counterparts, how they're doing in this. I mean, for instance, the United Arab Emirates, in terms of gender equality, is doing better than the United States. Yeah.
You know that, well, I'm interested in the selection process too, because in Spain now, you know that last years we have few people, not a lot of people interested to come here to work.
Yeah.
How is your selection process? Is more open, more trying to obtain an expertise in some areas you are interested? How is more or less the process?
We're hiring from all of the STEM disciplines and recruiting from the STEM disciplines, even if nuclear is not part of their background, and then maybe adding that as a training element. And I'm visiting a lot of universities that maybe don't have the big engineering programs, but that have very good STEM programs to get those students involved. And I also advertise the public service aspect of the work that we do. And you know, the NRC is a big beneficiary of the United States nuclear Navy. And so about 25% of our staff are military veterans, and the vast majority of those are Navy nuclear operators and health physicists and other kinds of things. So we get a significant benefit from that. I'll admit, and we've been really chasing the Navy angle quite heavily recently.
That's good source of people.
Yes, and those are people who are already dedicated to public service. So that aspect of the advertising, the recruitment is actually quite easy.
That's right.
Easier.
And just a last question. I'm geologist. How are the projects for geological disposal? How are these projects in the United States?
Thank you for the question.
Let's see. How do I want to approach that? We do not have much of a program in the United States right now for deep geologic disposal of high-level radioactive waste and spent nuclear fuel. We have a program for military-related transuranic waste. I think what you would call intermediate waste. We have a geologic repository for that in southwest New Mexico. We have a number of commercial and government low-level waste facilities that are, some of which are licensed by the NRC. We have a rulemaking underway to allow for that could allow for the shallow land disposal, so up to 90 meters of, again, what I think you would call intermediate waste. Here we call it greater than Class C. And there may be some sites in the drier areas of the United States that may be interested in that. But the overall policy for the spent fuel disposal resides with the Department of Energy. I could talk for a long time about this, but the utilities have a contractual relationship with the government. They've paid into a fund, a little bit like NRC, to eventually take that fuel, but the government has not, obviously, hasn't done that. But so.
Yeah, thank you. Any more questions? I was especially listening very carefully to you when you responded about the gender issue. I think that you allow me to complement your question, your answer, beyond the national or federal rules you have in place, which what I perceive is the high commitment of your organization to enhance this situation that he described. And frankly, I think we have several platforms where we are cooperating at international level, and he is one of the gender champions that he is very active in sharing with the rest of the community. Chris is doing very well that way. And in fact, for the next week conference, I think you have invited our Commissioner Lucio to attend and to actively participate in one of the sessions, so that the commitment is very clear. Thank you. Any more questions, please? I have also, while you think about one question, I would like also to react to your words about recruitment and difficulties, etc. We have now a lesson learned from the NRC. We need to push our government to develop a nuclear program in our Navy. So that we will benefit in the future. This will solve all our problems. Okay. Sorry for that. Yeah, any other question? If not, I have. I was very interested in what you mentioned about. I took note of. You mentioned your efforts in creating a high trust environment in your organization. You mentioned safety culture, and you mentioned safe environment. I think these three elements together are fantastic for developing a responsible organization dealing with these difficult matters of a regulatory body. Could you elaborate a little bit more on especially this safe environment that you are creating in your organization? I assume this is to promote people sharing their views, sharing their opinions, etc., in a context which is safe for them, and they are not expecting any retaliation or anything.
Yeah, we have, I think, both formal and informal processes on this, because as we move from more traditional and deterministic approaches to regulation and oversight, and more towards risk-informed and really leveraging the large body of knowledge we have, it means people's jobs change. And it means that sometimes the thing that they focused on, perhaps for their entire career, is maybe not as important as we thought it was. And that can be hard personally and organizationally. And we want to provide, the idea is to provide an environment where people can say, I disagree, I'm not ready to change my mindset quite yet, and to come up with ways to bring people along. I talk about this a lot in the organization, the importance of bringing people along, because there's so much going on in the U.S. In nuclear. We can't afford to leave anyone behind. And then in terms of the formal processes, we have processes for non-concurrences, which is at a kind of a lower level with regard to kind of technical determinations. And then we have a differing professional opinions, which are more formally adjudicated by a committee within the agency, and to that is empowered to make decisions about the interpretation of our regulations and their application, and making sure that people that there's transparency in those processes, that people can see how their views have been accounted for, have been, and that they feel and can see how they've been understood, even if they don't always get the answer that they're looking for.
I think this is fantastic. I think it's important to combine this with a high, let's say, implementation of the accountability concept,
Yes.
both at individual and team level.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I agree.
I have a lot of questions, but I wouldn't like to monopolize this this conversation. It's not a dialogue.
I didn't even talk about the materials aspect of our, or emergency planning, or security aspects of our work, which are quite significant as well. But,
I was wondering, for example, if you allow me, because I can't see anyone, that you mentioned that this ambition that is now growing in your country to build more nuclear, to increase the participation of nuclear in the country, and some of the most difficult matters that, in my opinion, were faced in previous big projects, both in the US but also in Finland or France, is related to the industrial infrastructure, about certified suppliers. How is the current situation to allow you to, let's say, embark in a ambitious program for building more facilities?
Yes, this is a great question. Do you have this phrase in Spanish, which came first, the chicken or the egg?
Oh, yeah.
Yes? Okay. All right. So I talk about chickens and eggs, right? Pollos y huevos. But I talk about this a lot because the development of the industrial base to support an expansion of nuclear power is a big issue, because in the United States, it's mostly nuclear is mostly a private sector endeavor. There are some incentives and some technology development grants and other things that the government can put out there, but they're almost entirely private sector. It's private sector decision making, and how do you spur the private sector to solve some of these problems up front? So, for example, some of the reactor technologies I mentioned earlier rely on high assay, low enriched uranium, 19.75%. There is no supply of, or there's only a very small supply of HALEU right now in the United States, and spurring that supply either from enrichers or the international market is actually exceptionally difficult, and that's only one area. I'm very excited. Where's my man from ENSA tomorrow? because if you just think about things like reactor vessels or other heavy equipment manufacturing for the global market, you can see that even global supply chains in the nuclear sector become oversubscribed very, very quickly, and so then as a regulator, and as someone who conducts vendor quality inspections and other kinds of things, I'm looking around the world and thinking, okay, well, where am I going to go for these kinds of specialized things, and how can I qualify them up front? I think my job as the regulator is to solve the chicken and egg problem within my purview, which is to have a robust, clear and reliable set of regulations to allow for the licensing of new reactor technologies that we deem safe, basically. And then, all of the other problems, that's we'll see.
One by one, no?
One by one.
Okay. Good. Any other intervention, reaction, or question? Okay, please, Gonzalo.
Sorry to bother you again.
No, we are very happy.
I was wondering whether you can comment on the shortage of conversion and enrichment services coming from Russia, and whether this applies to you as a regulator, whether you have something to do about this, or I mean, your view about what is happening now in the States with these services?
I don't have much to say about it. It is going to be a decision that's made by our State Department, our Foreign Ministry in the United States, and we will be one of the implementing agencies associated with that. We have limited authority for import and export of nuclear technologies at the NRC, but it fundamentally is a decision that will get made in another part of the government. I think the security of supply for our domestic reactor fleet is going to be a significant consideration in that deliberation within the U.S. government.
Thank you. Well, I can't see any more questions or so that I will take this opportunity to express once again our gratitude to you, Chris, for delivering this fantastic, well, not only presentation, but dialogue with us. This has been very good for us. And I will reiterate that for the CSN, NRC is a main partner, and I hope that we will continue intensifying our interactions for the benefit of our customers, who are not only the licensees, some of them are here, but our national societies that benefit from having good and better safety and security, nuclear safety and security, anyway. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
It's my pleasure.
Okay. Thank you. Very good. Okay. And thank you to all of you for very good. I think you really provided a very brief summary, but very clear in terms of why.
How are you?